little bit too much. So they are like so important explanation. Yeah, exactly. Not only one module can save the puzzle. So they argue. So that's true. So that's one of their arguments. So there is not one single explanation. So for all those puzzles. But then they go on and say so that in particularly the asymmetric information model, although important, in their opinion, have been a little bit overemphasized in the literature. And their beliefs is more into when they believe in the future the literature should go and the models which they should focus more on. Did anybody catch it from the article? Which is kind of their preferred explanation, or the explanation which they believe didn't attract enough attention in the literature. Yeah, that was specifically about the allocation. Allocation share. So it's a little bit controversial because they also, if you read the article in detail, you could those allocation model actually divide between put into the parts of symmetric information and asymmetric information. But it's true the way how they actually created or how they designed the article, the structure of the article. This is something. This is something what they stress. But more generally, behavioral, yes, behavioral, exactly, and agency conflicts, yeah. So, and more general, on a more general case, so the allocation, that's part of it, but it's maybe more specific question. More generally, they believe agency conflicts and behavioral explanation rather than rational explanation might have a better chance to explain all those puzzles as opposed to focusing only on information asymmetry models. Okay. So for those of you who didn't have time, who didn't have time to go through the article, I would encourage you, to go through it again. As I said, so this is a review article, so it's maybe a good entry into this academic literature. So there is still big part of the kind of objective truth or stating the facts. And later on, when you are going to read articles, you will see the authors will be even more, bold in making their own claims. And then, you will need to be even more critical in the reading of the literature and decide whether it's particularly when it's discussion in the literature, whether you are more convinced by one side or other side of the argument. Okay, moving to the part of the debt. So in the first set of slides on the debt financing, we provide overview of possible sources of debt financing. We start by the public corporate debt. So again, what is public corporate debt? Why do we call it public? It's similar to the, to the argument which we had regarding equity financing. So if you just apply the same analogy, what would be the public corporate debt? Why do we call it public?
You can buy their shares.
Say again?
You can buy their shares.
It's not shares, no. So it's important. No. We are talking about debt now.
All right, the bonds.
Yeah, so it's exactly so. So it's the debt. So it's the same argument as with the shares before, but it's not shares. So the debt can be publicly tradable on the markets, so everybody can buy and sell it. And exactly so in most cases, then they take the forms of bonds, right? So that means bonds. It's important to distinguish this between between the private and public firms, right? Because private firms can also issue bonds in general, although that actually doesn't really happen in the practice. But the other way around is not so unusual. The public company would take a private debt, means bank loans, right? So public corporations, take private bank loans all the time. So this is about the, not about the, I mean, so like the character of the company, whether the company is private or public, but the particular debt instrument which the company issues, whether that instrument is publicly tradable, as bonds are, or whether it's not tradable. The typical example would be bank loan. So we then, like, so regarding the public corporate debt, I mean, so the slides discuss the importance of distinguishing between secured and unsecured debt, right? Secured debt is the one where, I mean, so where the debt is covered by a certain collateral, the importance of seniority, right? So if the debt has higher seniority, that means if something goes bad, if the company goes bankrupt, gets liquidated, those are the first in line. I mean, so the owners of the debt with the high seniority are the first in line to get their money back. So that means, based on those distinctions, so what of the debt, I mean, so usually offers higher yield, and why? So between secured and unsecured debt, where would you expect, so that, I mean, so which of those debt would you expect has a higher yield? Unsecured, exactly. And between, I mean, so the ones with the, I mean, so with the like, so high seniority and low seniority, which one will have higher yield? No, it's the other one, low seniority. So the low seniority and unsecured debt. Why? Because it's about the riskiness, right? So the debt which is unsecured, there is no collateral related directly to the debt, so it's more risky. If something, I mean, so if something goes bad with the company, you have lower probability to get your money back. And by the same argument, I mean, so if your seniority is low, that means you are not at the front of the queue, but at the back of the queue. And if the company goes bankrupt, when all the, I mean, so debt holders with higher seniority got paid, there is probably nothing left for you. So that's why unsecured debt and low seniority debt is higher risk, and that's why it also has a higher yield. Okay, so then, I mean, so the slides finish with the, I mean, so private corporate debt, as I mentioned before, it is mostly, okay, so what is yield? Okay, so there's like question, what is yield? So yield is, I mean, so like that would be the equivalent of the interest rate in the bank loans, right? So that means, I mean, so you have the principal payment, and then, I mean, so the principal payment in the bank loan, and then, I mean, so you pay the interest on top of it, right? So you're like, so paying the debt holders for the fact that it all, I mean, so gives you money. In case of bonds, because they are publicly tradable, you know, so the original interest can go up and down. So